everyone, and welcome to the MEMSPA Minutes video series. I am Mike Domagalski. I have the privilege of being the president of the Michigan Elementary and Middle School Principals Association for the 2021 and 22 school year. Today's MEMSPA Minutes video series is going to focus on advocacy, and this is going to post on September 30th, but please check this video out and share it. The MEMSPA Minutes video series will be on the MEMSPA TV YouTube channel, so also check that out. Today, I am very humbled and honored to have two guests with me as part of our MEMSPA strategic plan. I have Dr. David Simpson, and he is at Forest Hills Middle School, and he is also our MEMSPA advocacy co-chair. He is very involved with advocacy through MEMSPA. I also have Dr. Travis Smith. He is at Cherry Creek Elementary as the principal there. So welcome both gentlemen. Glad to have you on the video series.
Thank you.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here. And I would clarify Northern Hills Middle School. There's 3 middle schools, and we're very proud of our Huskies here at Northern Hills.
You are correct. Northern Hills Middle School and Forest Hills School District, correct? Yep. Correct. I always mess that up, David, all the time. So glad to have you guys on, though, to talk a little bit about advocacy for not only just our MEMSPA membership, but really anyone in ed leadership who's checking this out, listening or watching. So the first and foremost, just, a couple seconds, just a little bit better than my introduction. You want to tell people that are listening or watching maybe a little bit about yourselves. David, go ahead and go first.
Sure. I'm part of the founding member of the Dr. Smith fan club. And so, I say that in sincerity. My name is David Simpson. I'm the principal here at Northern Hills Middle School. And I had the gift and the privilege of partnering with Dr. Smith on the advocacy role in the committee. It was my first time working and interacting with Dr. Smith, and it just was a fantastic experience. So thank you so much for this opportunity. And Travis, it's good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you as well, David. As you said, we were co-chairs on this advocacy committee, and it was a great experience. We worked with some awesome folks from around the state. We had great regional representation. And as Mike mentioned, I'm an elementary principal, and I'm based in Marquette, Michigan, on the South Shores of Lake Superior.
Yeah, and what's really cool, and as part of that advocacy committee, the committee itself is made up of members throughout the entire state. And I can just mention just us 3. I mean, we're at Grand Rapids, the west side, Marquette in the north, and I'm actually on the advocacy committee as well. I'm on the east side. So it's really well represented by people throughout the state.
Mike, I'm glad you're bringing that up. One of the quotes that we had put in our presentation was from Madeline Kunin, and it says, "We see the world through the lens of all of our experiences." And that's the fundamental part of the human condition. And so Travis and I were so intentional on trying to have a diverse group of representative members on this committee. And Travis, I think we accomplished that. We had suburban, urban, rural, we had leaders of color, we had gender diversity, I just think it was really powerful to see that, and that created a better product because we had those diverse voices in the room with us, Mike.
No, and that's fantastic, and that's well to note. So thank you, David, for mentioning that. So when we talk about MEMSPA right now with what's happening in 2021 and 22, we are talking about a strategic plan. And in the next coming weeks, I'll be highlighting the chairs, co-chairs on all 4 pillars of the strategic plan, and today's advocacy. So can you guys talk about the MEMSPA strategic plan, maybe what your role is, how it relates to advocacy, just the nuts and bolts about it?
Yeah, Travis, you want to start with that?
Yeah, well, and I think, Mike, you mentioned it. There are 4 areas, and so you could think of those 4 areas as really 4 legs on a chair. And so we have the diversity, equity, and inclusion section, strengthening MEMSPA, and David and I, of course, co-chaired the legislative advocacy group, and then professional development would be that 4th leg of that chair.
Correct. So a little bit about the advocacy. So what parts, I know that we are developing advocacy. I'm looking through some paperwork here. It's looking like some work is starting to be ongoing. What can maybe some MEMSPA members anticipate as part of this work?
Yeah, I think when we think about our goal areas in advocacy, one of the things we talked about was the idea of this plan truly was a plan from the state, the principals from across the state. We used a crowdsourcing approach to develop. Really, we asked ourselves, if we think about it, what is our current state? And we think about the visioning work. And I know Visioning Onward is a book that Paul Liebenow had co-authored. But really, what is our current state, our current reality, and what's our preferred vision, our future? If we said 5 years from now, that we felt strong and felt good about what we're doing as a professional principal organization to advocate on behalf of members and staff and students, what would that look like? And so we started asking those questions. And from that, three themes really emerged from our work. The idea first really was developing advocacy. Advocating for the principalship was the second one. And then we looked at how do we rise above COVID? And that's really those the three areas that came, and we're excited about what that looks like moving forward for our members.
I think, as David mentioned earlier, we were really intentional about looking for diversity within our committee membership. And we were also looking for a lot of different responses that were representative of the different principles that are found throughout the state of Michigan. So we turned around and we reached out to our friends who are in the field and, in our region and across regions, and to make sure that their voices were heard. And so with these themes that were developed, this wasn't just the thoughts of the committee, but this is really representative of upwards of at least 60 different principles found throughout the state.
Yeah, and just to highlight really quick that you mentioned, sorry, David, but advocating for the principalship, one thing I'm starting to hear more and more of are all of the openings. And we're probably seeing them as leaders in our buildings as it pertains to teachers or staff or parapros, but it's also something that's starting to hit the principalship too. So we need to have that advocacy for that principalship. And it's part of your work that's doing that. The second piece I wanted to mention is rising above COVID. I know the beginning of my year has been a little tough. Especially as it pertains to not only just, trying to really motivate our staff and re-energize ourselves, but really working with our students, the mental health that we're seeing, at least I'm seeing in my building, some of that, and still lack of internet sources, lack of devices for students that are quarantined or choosing virtual, closing those gaps. I mean, there's a lot of things supporting SEL. I see a lot of that work as part of that rising above COVID, as part of that strategic plan of advocacy. So I just really appreciate the work that you guys have done thus far. And I look forward to, this school year about what's going to come from the advocacy portion of the committee.
Now, Mike, I'm glad you mentioned the idea of advocating for the principalship. As we talk to members from across the state, even early career principals, sometimes I feel I've heard the word stuck. Like I'm just stuck as my role as a principal. I deal with COVID. I have to go to board meetings, and the board meetings are very contentious throughout our state, with families with a variety of opinions on a lot of different issues. And right now, for a lot of our colleagues, it's just not fun. And so I think it's important, as part of our advocacy goal that came from this, is that we've always talked about who better to tell the stories of our students than us. Well, I would push us to say, who's better to tell the stories of principals than our principals? Exactly. And we really need to communicate that and advocate that. Part of our advocacy plan and our goal area is to have a principal messaging campaign. One of the things, addition to that, is shadow a principal. That was one of the best things when I had our representative from state representative come and shadow me for a half day. It's one thing to make decisions in Lansing with an idea of what you think principals have to go through, but it's one thing to walk in our shoes. And so you'll see that coming out in the coming years about how a formalized shadow a principal. And then also, one of the things that MEMSPA has done a great job of is that highlighting the pathways to become the principal, alternatives to certification. I know we worked with Davenport in the past, but how do we get the next generation of leaders to come forward? We need good leaders moving forward if we're going to rise above COVID. And so we're excited about that. You're going to hear more about that from Travis and me in the coming years.
And to piggyback off of something that David just mentioned is, I don't know if folks saw the September 7 email from MEMSPA, but Cindy announced the launch of the MEMSPA Ambassador Program. And that's really at the heart of the work that we were doing on the committee, trying to get our new principals connected with those veterans that are found in the region, and just make sure that, that we who've been in the field, we're nurturing them and inspiring them to go on and do great things. So, and just let them know that we're not alone in this profession, that you may be the lone elementary principal or middle school principal in your district, but you have friends out there, both near and far, and let them know that there's those connections, and those folks can reach out anytime and get the help and advice they need.
Awesome. Yeah, I think principals need each other more now than ever. I'm really looking forward to our in-person conference at the state conference in December. We're going to talk more about advocacy, but I think most importantly, we're going to talk about the connections and network. And one of the things coming out of that, our group, you'll see again, is our advocacy apprenticeship program. Travis and I have been working on it behind the scenes. We're excited about what that looks like, because advocacy is often scary for our principals. We're really good at leading literacy, leading schools, working with teachers, but sometimes it's hard for us to come out of our shell and advocate for the principalship, advocate for our schools. But we have a gifted group of MEMSPA members throughout the state that have experience. And so we're excited about really getting that off the ground and leading some professional learning around advocacy. Because it's one thing to just go to lobby day. It's one thing to just say, call, email your legislators like we did with our virtual conference or virtual lobby day of Connection last April. But it's another thing to actually learn how to do that and provide the resources for that. So we're excited for that coming forward out of this plan.
That's really exciting, because I think that what people are wanting to hear or wanting to know are just tools for their tool belt. Like, how do I get involved? I don't know who to contact. Yeah. What's, who are my legislators? What do I say to them? Because I think a lot of times people are nervous about not only just contacting them, but also what to say, or to feel like, if I say this, they're going to come back with something else. They don't have those tools in their tool belt.
I agree, Mike. I think that's a key piece you just mentioned. We're always building relationships in our job as a principal, maybe with students or staff or parents, but it's also about building relationships with those key stakeholders in state government. So being comfortable and knowing what those tools are that we can employ to elicit change on that type of level is really important.
Yeah, one of the things that will surface in some of those that learning together, our representatives and our senators in the state are just our neighbors. They're the people that live down the street from us. And more often than not, I think this is a really key idea for our members to know. We often will know way more about educational issues and funding and the concerns and needs of kids than they do. And I get that. They have to look at issues from across the gamut of economics to government to local government to education. They can't know everything. And so that's really the cool thing, is that we get to tell our story and inform so that they can be in a position to best support our schools and our students and our principals.
And it sounds like the strategic plan has ongoing work in order to provide those principals with those tools, correct? And that's kind of the objective of the next year.
Yeah, if you think about, as we talked about earlier, the strategic plan captured our current reality, and then through the crowdsourcing and the work of our members, when we had a fantastic, and I know Mike, you were on that committee, I was so proud of the team. It's where we're going to get to, and that doesn't happen overnight, Mike and Travis. We all know that. But it's those incremental steps that everything we do aligns to the vision that we've set forth as an organization. And the exciting part is we're going to get there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And an interesting thing you said is, oftentimes those legislators, they don't know what's happening in our schools necessarily, or they may be, swayed to one way, or they may think one way, but it's that conversation we can have with them. That's just real life. Like, hey, come visit my school. Let's have a conversation about what it's really like going on. And I know my conversations with some of my legislators, the senators in the House of Reps that I've talked to, it's been very impactful, because they just didn't know what they didn't know. And I'm very strategic about saying it like that. They didn't know what they didn't know. And when I brought those 2 or 3 topics to the table with them, they said, wow, that's interesting. Tell me more, because I just didn't know that. So that might impact a vote, which might obviously help us out, which is all about the advocacy piece.
I think one of the cool things to think about too is, we have, as MEMSPA, we have legislative priorities. We have things that we're advocating for our school. We may not always come to agreement with our legislators or senators. They might have a difference in opinion, but we can create those relationships that foster really awesome discourse, because then with those relationships can be, when there's an issue coming up or a question, like I will get calls from legislators now. We may disagree, but I get called to say, hey, what do you think about this, David? We're thinking about this. Can you give me your opinion on this? How will this impact schools? We may not come to agreement, but we're going to be a lot closer because of that relationship piece.
Yeah, for sure. If you guys had to put your advocacy hat on, legislative hat on, what are 1 or 2 hot topics do you think that are going to be coming here in the next couple of months from the legislation? I mean, what are things that are going to be really impacting schools, statewide, federal wide, local? What is 1 or 2 things you can kind of communicate to people right now?
Well, we're excited. I'm going to speak that we were able to get the budget taken care of in June. So we had some certainty coming forward, at least with the education funding. I'm going to continue to advocate for our elementary, even though I'm a middle school principal, looking at 3rd grade retention. We know that retention is not the right vehicle to support growth. There are a lot of great things. It's a lot of focus on literacy in our elementary schools. And so that's been a nice thing, but we'll continue to push against that retention part. I just don't think that that's fair. I think it disproportionately harms our students of color. It disproportionately harms students in lower poverty school areas. And so that's a big one that we continue to push against. And then I don't know about all of you, but Mike, I know you had a science position that went unfilled all of last year. I think our legislators are starting to see the talent pipeline and the teachers of College of Ed pipeline are drastically reduced. And as those get reduced because teachers leave to become principals, our principals, their shortages there, we have a principal shortage as well. And so I think creating that story, that advocating for what the principals are, what teachers are, I see that as a continuing ongoing issue to support schools across the state. Travis, what else do you think I see out there?
Yeah, David, you hit the nail on the head. The third grade reading law and state assessment in general, I think are things that we need to address. And you're so right about teaching candidates and social workers and school psychs. And as we have people that are leaving the profession, and I don't know about you guys, but I'm sure that you struggled finding candidates over the summer. And we were fortunate at Cherry Creek Elementary School to find quality teaching candidates, but there just weren't a lot of candidates out there. And so how can we encourage people to join the profession, but also make sure that we have diversity as well? So how can we encourage people of color to join the profession in a greater percentage than we've ever seen? So that is a concern moving forward. But I know the solution's out there, and I think MEMSPA is the organization that can help provide some of the answers as well.
Right. And I'm really excited, not only just that advocacy is part of the strategic plan, but I'm excited to see what's going to come from it. Right. Because it's the actions that speak louder than the words that are being said. Like, we need this, we would like this. It's nice to see that there's action behind some of this stuff. And you couldn't have two better people behind the advocacy committee than you guys. So I appreciate all your work. Before we sign off, is there anything else you'd like to say? Anything around advocacy in general?
Just saying, if you're going to be up at the state conference, there's going to be a few surprises to be had with the advocacy. So I look forward, and Travis and I look forward to sharing some more of that at the state conference. And the state conference, you can go to memspa.org and register now. The annual conference is up December 8th through the 10th. So that annual conference is the place to be. So make sure that you're registering for that. But Travis, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, as David has said throughout, and something we looked at through our committee, is this idea of that preferred future. And through advocacy as a principal, you have the opportunity to shape that future. And as David said, come join us at the state conference and learn about some of our plans.
Yeah, and that state conference is the perfect opportunity to not only just get more information, but to build those relationships with everyone that's there. These two fine guys in particular, as it pertains to advocacy. So, hey, I appreciate you, Dr. Travis Smith, and Marquette Cherry Creek Elementary School, for joining us today. I appreciate you as well, Dr. David Simpson, Northern Hills Middle School in Grand Rapids, Michigan, Forest Hills School District. So thank you guys very much. I appreciate you both very much for all of your work. Thanks for everyone tuning in to this MEMSPA Minutes video series. Once again, this posts every Thursday at 8:30 on the hashtag MEMSPA chat and also various social media platforms. You can find all of the MEMSPA Minutes video series on the YouTube channel, MEMSPA TV. So the simple thing, you just got to search it and subscribe. We upload a video every week. So for all of us principals leading learning, thank you so much. We are better together. Thank you to Travis. Thank you to David. Thank you to everybody out there for the hard work.
All right.
Appreciate you guys.
Thanks for your leadership, Mike.
I appreciate that, David. And you know what? We're all better together. So we'll end on that. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week as part of the MEMSPA Minutes video series.